stories rise whispering, the echoes from the lone.
Welcome, wayward souls. Light your lanterns and steady your breath, and listen closely, because tonight we walk a road that bends in the ways the waking world does not. A road where the hedgerows seem to lean inward as though they're eavesdropping, and the mist gathers in slow, deliberate coils. A road where a creature older than the stones, and as sly as a shifting shadow, waits for the one who dares to meet its gaze. The Púca is a shapeshifter, a night wanderer, a creature who offers rides that end not in distance, but in revelation or ruin. I ask you as always that if this story sits with you, if it follows you in the dark, to like, share, subscribe, so that the echoes from the loam may reach other like-minded souls. The village of Bayanahishka rested against the long shoulder of a hill that rose like a sleeping giant. Its slopes layered with fields that changed colour with the seasons, pale green in spring, deep emerald in summer, rust gold in autumn, and a muted bruised brown in winter. The cottages were built from stone pulled from the earth generations ago, each one shaped by hands long gone, each one holding stories in its walls like pressed flowers between pages. Their roofs sagged slightly under years of weather. Their chimneys leaned as though whispering secrets to one another, and their windows glowed with the soft amber light of peat fires that never fully died. On the night the Púca came, Bayanahishka felt different. Not wrong, but expectant, as though the village itself held its breath. The mist rose early, sliding between the hedgerows in pale ribbons, and clinging to the low stone walls that divided the fields. It softened the edges of the cottage until they looked like half-remembered dreams. And the moon hung low, a milky disk blurred by moisture. Its light diffused into a faint glow that made the world appear washed, as though someone had dipped the night in water and lifted it out before it dried. Animals sensed it first. Dogs barked at corners of the yard where nothing stood, their bodies stiff, their ears pricked, their eyes fixed on something only they could see. Horses refused their stables, stamping and snorting, staring toward the hill with a tension that made their muscles ripple beneath their coats. Even the cattle shifted uneasily, their breath rising in slow clouds, their heads turning towards the same point, the bend in the road where the hedgerows grew thickest. Aisling walked home from the mill with the shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, her boots damp from the dew that clung stubbornly to the grass. She was 27, with hair the colour of chestnut bark and eyes that held the quiet determination of someone who had learned to endure more than she ever admitted. Her hands were calloused from work, her posture straight from habit, her steps steady from necessity. She had never feared the dark, but she had always respected it. And tonight the darkness felt thick and almost sentient. She passed by the cooper who stood outside his workshop with a lantern held high, his brows furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. He nodded to her, but his eyes flicked towards the hill again, unable to stay fixed on her face. She passed Maura Flanagan, who clutched her shawl tight and whispered prayers under her breath, her gaze darting towards the bend in the road. She passed by Seamus O'Callaghan, who held his horse by the reins, murmuring to it in a low, soothing voice, though the animal's eyes rolled white with unease. Aisling felt the village tension like a pulse beneath her feet. She had grown up hearing stories of the Púca, the shapeshifter who appeared as a black horse with eyes like lantern flames, or a goat with spiraling obsidian horns, or a sleek hound whose fur seemed woven from midnight itself. It offered rides, the elders said, and those rides ended in revelation or ruin, depending on what the rider carried in their heart. Some returned wiser, some returned broken, and some did not return at all. Folklore belonged to the edges of life, and Aisling always thought the liminal spaces, the whispered warnings, the stories told beside fires when the wind howled against the shutters. She never expected to step into the centre of her path. But when she reached the foot of the hill, she saw a shape standing in the road. Tall, dark, gleaming faintly as though moonlight pooled beneath its skin. At first she thought it was a horse, but no horse stood so still, nor watched with eyes that flickered like candle wicks. Its mane rippled without wind, each strand moving with a strange, deliberate life, as though responding to a rhythm only the creature could hear. The Púca lowered its head, and Aisling felt the invitation before she understood it. A soft pressure behind her ribs, a tug in her chest, a whisper that was not a voice but a sensation, a pull that felt both ancient and intimate. She should have run, should have crossed herself, should have remembered every warning her grandmother had ever given, but instead she stepped forward, drawn by something deeper than fear, deeper than curiosity, something that felt more like inevitability. The creature shifted as she approached, its form bending like heat haze, its legs lengthening, its back widening, its silhouette rippling as though made of smoke. For a moment, it was a great black goat, horns spiraling like carved stone. Then it was a dog with a coat of midnight and eyes like twin embers. And then it settled again into the shape of a horse, though its hooves glowed faintly, as though forged from moonlight. Aisling placed her hands on its neck. The warmth surprised her. She had expected cold or nothingness, or the strange neutrality of magic. But the Púca felt alive, pulsing, aware as though it recognized her. So she climbed onto its back. The creature moved without sound, its hooves touching the earth as lightly as falling ash. They ascended the hill, passing through mist that curled around them like pale fingers, and the village fell away behind them, shrinking into a scattered dim of lights. Aisling felt the world tilt, not physically but spiritually, as though she had stepped out of the ordinary and into a place where choices mattered more, where truth waited like a blade beneath silk. hilltop field stretched wide beneath the moon. Its grass flattened in places where wind had pressed it down over years. Its edges marked by ancient stones, half buried in the earth, each one carved with lichen patterns that looked almost like script. Aisling had stood here many times in daylight, gathering herbs or watching storms roll in from the west. But tonight the field felt transformed. Larger, older, as though she had stepped not onto a hill but into a memory. The Púca stood beside her, its breath rising in slow clouds that drifted upward and dissolved into the mist. Its eyes glowed faintly, not bright enough to illuminate the field, but bright enough to make the darkness around them feel alive. Aisling felt the creature's attention like a weight on her chest. Not oppressive as such, but undeniable. As though it saw her not as she appeared, but as she truly was. The mist thickened. It rose from the grass in slow coils gathering around her feet. It spread to her knees, then her waist, until she stood in a pale, swirling veil that moved with a strange intelligence. Shapes formed within it, silhouettes at first, then clearer figures, each one drawn from the deepest corners of her memory. She saw her mother, Ethna, standing in the doorway of their cottage, her hair tied back, her hands dusted with flour, her smile tired but warm. She saw her father, Cullum, sitting at the table with his head bowed, the weight of unspoken disappointment pressing his shoulders down. She saw her child friend Ronan, the boy she had once trusted with every secret, the boy she had hurt with the careless words spoken in anger, the boy who had left the village the next day without even saying goodbye. Mist shifted again, showing moments she had buried. The night she had cried alone behind the mill. The morning she lied to protect someone she loved. In the afternoon, she turned away from an opportunity because she feared she was not good enough. Aisling felt her breath catch, and the Púca stepped closer. Its hooves silent on the grass, its eyes burning softly. It didn't speak. The Púca rarely ever used words, but its presence pressed against her thoughts, urging her to look, to see, to understand. The mist parted and two paths appeared before her. One narrow and familiar leading back to Balanahishka, to the cottage where she slept, to the mill where she worked, to the life she had always known. Safe, predictable. The other, wide and wild, leading into the unknown, into possibility, risk, a future she couldn't yet imagine. Aisling closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the mist had cleared, and the Púca stood beside her waiting. She placed her hand on its neck, her voice barely a breath. "I'm ready." The creature bowed and the world shifted. And the ride that followed was unlike anything Aisling had ever experienced. The Púca moved with a speed that felt impossible, its hooves barely touching the earth, its body stretching and contracting as though made of shadow and moonlight. The landscape blurred, fields melting into hedgerows, hedgerows melting into forest, forest melting into open moorland where the wind howled like a living thing. Aisling clung to the creature's mane. her fingers gripping strands that felt both solid and insubstantial, as though woven from smoke. The air rushed past her cold and sharp, carrying scents that she had never noticed before. The metallic tang of distant rain, the earthy musk of the peat bogs, the faint sweetness of wild gorse blooming somewhere far below. The Púca did not speak, but its movements told a story. It carried her through places she had never seen. A valley where ancient standing stones leaned toward each other like conspirators. A riverbank where the water glowed faintly, lit by bioluminescent algae. A cliffside path where the wind screamed against the rocks, tearing at her shawl and stinging her eyes. And everywhere they went, the world felt thinner, as though she rode not through Ireland, but through spaces, between stories where truth and myth intertwined. The creature slowed, and they reached a clearing deep within a forest. Tall oaks with trunks twisted like braided rope, their branches heavy with leaves that shimmered faintly, reflecting moonlight in strange patterns. The ground was soft beneath her boots when she dismounted, covered in a moss that glowed faintly, as though lit from within. And the Púca stood before her. Its form flickered, horse, goat, hound, shadow, shifting with every breath, every heartbeat, each thought she dared to have. Aisling felt the creature's attention settle on her once again, heavy and ancient, as though it was weighing on her soul. The mist rose once more. But this time it did not show memories, it showed possibilities. She saw herself standing in the mill, older, tired, her hands worn, her dreams forgotten. She saw herself leaving Ballinahishka, travelling to distant towns, learning new skills, meeting new people. She saw herself failing, succeeding, breaking, rising. The mist swirled faster, the images blurring and merging, collapsing into one until she could no longer tell which future belonged to her and which belonged to someone she could have been. Aisling fell to her knees, and the Púca stepped closer. Its muzzle touched her forehead, and the world shattered. Not violently and not with pain, but with clarity. Aisling felt every fear she had ever carried peel away layer by layer, until she stood bare before herself, stripped of excuses, stripped of doubt, stripped of the smallness she had wrapped around her life like a shield. She gasped and the mist vanished. The forest faded, the clearing dissolved. She stood once more at the foot of the hill above Ballinahishka, her boots damp with dew, her shawl clinging to her shoulders and her breath rising in slow clouds. And Púca stood before her. Its eyes dimmed, then brightened. A farewell, a blessing and a warning, before its form flickered and blurred and dissolved. Aisling reached out, but her hand only touched air. The creature was gone. She walked home with steady steps, her lantern unlit, her hearth alight. So light your lanterns, wayward souls, and remember that some creatures do not come to frighten you, but to show you the truth you've been avoiding. The Púca offers rides that end in revelation or ruin, but the ending is always yours to choose. So carry what you learned today, and until the next episode, keep your lanterns close, your path open, and your courage steady.